End the Inner War. How to Finally Be at Peace with Yourself. Chapter 1. The Architecture of Desire Continued. The Resonance of Deficiency. We do not merely crave happiness. We crave the definitive sense that we have arrived in Buddhist psychology. This state is categorized as tanhan, insatiable thirst, much like a current that never stops flowing, perpetually attempting to fill a vessel that has no bottom. The problem is not the vessel, but the deeply ingrained delusion that the vessel must be full to possess any worth. We are meticulously trained from childhood to equate happiness with a reward for labor, a trophy to be claimed at the end of a long, arduous climb. We tether our self-worth to external metrics, the security of our employment, the perceived perfection of our relationships, the status afforded by our possessions. Each time a goal is reached, the subsequent satisfaction acts as a fleeting spark, an intense burst of pleasure that lasts mere minutes, hours, or perhaps a few days before the mind, fueled by habit, begins to scan the horizon for the next summit. The exhaustion we feel is not the result of the labor itself, but the constant abrasive friction between the reality of the present moment and the projections of our future desires. By placing happiness perpetually in the future, we render the present moment a mere transit station, a place of no intrinsic value. We sacrifice the serenity of today on the altar of a promise of future fulfillment. However, the future is a phantom. It is a conceptual horizon that recedes further away every time we attempt to bridge the distance. This is why desire functions as a subtle form of psychological torment. We are locked in a race where the finish line is forever moving. The mechanics of attachment. Attachment, or upadana, the inevitable consequence of this craving. When we desire a state of happiness, we do not simply wish for it. We attempt to claim it as a permanent feature of our identity. We treat happiness as a possession, an asset that must be secured and guarded. This attachment creates immense psychological tension. Imagine walking through a forest, attempting to grasp the beams of sunlight filtering through the canopy. You can witness them. You can feel the warmth upon your skin, but you cannot possess the light. The moment you clench your fist to hold it, you hold only air. The frustration that arises is not because the light was unreal, but because the attempt to possess it was rooted in a misunderstanding of its nature. Happiness operates under the same law. It is a transient phenomenon, an emergent property of specific conditions, not a static object that can be stored in the vault of the ego. When we attempt to hoard happiness, be clinging to relationships, accumulating material wealth, or striving to keep our mood at a constant highway, are effectively constructing a prison for our own awareness. We become hypervigilant toward anything that might disrupt that state. We tremble at the prospect of loss, and that very anxiety is the silent executioner of the happiness we seek. The more desperately we try to grip it, the more fragile our peace becomes. The illusion of the self in desire. Why is this hunger so persistent? It originates in the architecture of the ego. The ego requires constant validation to confirm its existence and its stability. Happiness is often interpreted as the ultimate proof of the ego's success. If I am happy, the ego concludes, then I am navigating life correctly. I am winning the game. Conversely, if I am sad, empty, or anxious, the ego interprets this as a personal failure or a flaw in the system. It does not view sadness as a neutral, passing state of the mind. It views it as a verdict. This resistance to sadness is essentially a defense mechanism designed to protect the ego from confronting its own transient nature. If we were to fully embrace sadness as a natural shift in our inner weather, the ego would feel threatened, as it would no longer be able to maintain its persona of the victor or the controller. By ceasing the frantic pursuit of happiness, we do more than alleviate our exhaustion. We begin to dismantle the ego's iron grip on our perception. We begin to understand that peace is not derived from making the ego better, but from realizing that the ego does not require our constant protection, as it is merely a collection of shifting thoughts and memories that rise and fall like waves in an ocean. The temporal distortions of attachment. Attachment does not only distort our present, it actively colonizes our relationship with time. When we are attached to a specific state of happiness, we live in a state of temporal displacement. We are either mourning the good old days, when we felt better, or we are projecting forward to a time when we will be happy again. This leaves the present moment, the only place where life actually occurs, entirely hollow. In Buddhist philosophy, this is the tragedy of samsara, the cycle of wandering. We become like a person lost in a house with many rooms, refusing to sit in any of them because we are convinced that a better room exists just around the corner. We spend our lives waiting for the conditions to be right. We say, I will be at peace when I finish this project, or I will be happy when my circumstances change. By doing so, we turn our current existence into a preparatory fascia waiting room for a life that we believe is real. But if we are always waiting for the future to validate the present, we are effectively choosing to be miserable in the only time that is ever available to us. The fragility of conditions. The fundamental error of the attached mind is the belief that happiness is a sustainable product of conditions. We believe that if we align the external variables, a comfortable home, a stable income, healthy relationships, and a lack of overt conflict, will generate a permanent state of joy. Yet this is like trying to build a castle on the surface of the ocean. The ocean is naturally turbulent. It is the nature of the world to change. When we rely on conditions for our peace, we become slaves to those conditions. If your happiness depends on your health, you live in constant terror of sickness. If it depends on your reputation, you live in terror of criticism. The more conditions you attach to your happiness, the more vulnerable you become. This is why the path of non-attachment is not an act of cynicism, but one of radical liberation. By letting go of the need for conditions to be a certain way, you are not losing your capacity for joy. You are simply removing the gatekeeper that keeps you from experiencing the richness of the present, the feedback loop of expectation. Attachment also creates an insidious feedback loop, the expectation-reality gap. We form a mental model of how life should be, and we compare every moment against that model. When life diverges from our mental script, when we experience loss, rejection, or boredom, we feel that the world has failed us. We don't just experience the difficulty, we experience the indignation of the difficulty. This indignation is an extra layer of suffering that is entirely optional. When you drop the expectation, you are left only with the raw fact of the situation. A rainy day is just rain. It is no longer an insult to your weekend plans. A difficult conversation is just a difficult conversation. It is no longer a sign that your relationship is a failure. By removing the expectation, you strip away the story that creates the drama. You are no longer fighting the world, you are simply living within it. This is the moment the inner war begins to subside, the ego's fear of surrender. There is a profound, almost primal terror associated with the idea of letting go. Many individuals subconsciously believe that they're suffering their restlessness, their grip on their desires, their constant self-analysis, actually a form of protection. They fear that if they release their attachments, they will drift into a state of aimlessness or become vulnerable to life's chaos. This is a profound misunderstanding of the nature of awareness. The ego convinces us that the tight, suffocating grip we keep on our desires is the only thing standing between us and total collapse. It whispers, if you stop wanting, if you stop striving, you will lose your drive, you will become nothing. But this nothingness the ego fears is actually the space of infinite potential. When you let go of the rigid requirements of how your life must look, you are not losing your agency, you are gaining your freedom. You are shifting from a state of reaction to a state of response. A person who is attached to their desires is constantly reacting to whether the world is fulfilling those desires. They are a passenger on a roller coaster of external events. By contrast, a person who has practiced letting go is the pilot of their own awareness. They see the landscape as it is, not as they wish it to be, and therefore, their actions are always aligned with the reality of the situation, rather than the fantasy of their cravings. The myth of the self-repair project. Furthermore, the chase for happiness is often disguised as a self-improvement project. We tell ourselves that we are just working on ourselves, that we are fixing our internal architecture, so that we might finally be worthy of lasting peace. This creates a toxic, lifelong cycle of self-evaluation. We become both the judge and the prisoner. We watch our thoughts, we critique our emotions, and we measure our spiritual progress as if it were a performance metric. This is the final trap of the architecture of desire, the belief that the self is a broken machine that needs to be repaired. Buddhism teaches that there is no self to fix, only the illusion of a self to see through. When you stop treating your internal state as a project, the urgency of the repair work dissolves. You realize that you were never broken. You were just conditioned to believe that your natural state, which includes sadness, boredom, and complexity, was a defect. The conclusion of the chase. As we wrap up this exploration of desire, we must recognize that the chase is not something you stop once and for all in a single moment of epiphany. It is a daily, moment-to-moment realization. It is the practice of noticing the mind as it begins to reach for the future, noting the craving for more, and gently returning to the present. The cessation of desire is not a permanent state of numbness. It is a permanent state of wakefulness. It is the end of the war with reality. When the demand for life to be happy ends, the immense energy that was once consumed by that demand is suddenly liberated. This energy is what allows us to truly connect with others, to work with purpose, and to move through the world with a lightness that was previously impossible. We are no longer trying to force the world to serve our needs. We are participating in the world as it unfolds. We have moved from the periphery of our own lives where we were constantly looking for happiness, elsewhere to the center of our own experience, where peace is recognized not as a destination, but as the ground upon which we stand. Chapter 2. Sadness is a natural mental state. The deceptive labeling of negative emotions. With the architecture of desire now deconstructed, we must address the most misunderstood aspect of the human heart, the inevitability of sadness. In modern culture, we have become experts at segregating our emotional lives. We have developed an entire lexicon for positive versus negative states. We treat happiness, confidence, and excitement as healthy, while we relegate sadness, grief, loneliness, and melancholy to the category of dysfunction. We treat these feelings like intruders, or worse, like symptoms of a disease that must be eradicated as quickly as possible. However, from the viewpoint of a grounded, observant consciousness, this categorization is fundamentally unscientific. Emotions are not moral entities, they are information. They are the body and mind's way of processing the immense complexity of existence. To label sadness as bad is to impose a value judgment on a natural phenomenon, akin to labeling the winter as bad because it is not summer. By creating these categories, we create the friction that transforms a fleeting feeling into a prolonged suffering. The social conditioning of the performance of optimism. We live in an era of unprecedented emotional surveillance. Through the lens of social media and the relentless, glossy marketing of wellness, we are constantly fed an image of a life that is perpetually upbeat, productive, and aesthetically pleasing. We see the curated highlights of others' lives, and we unconsciously use them as the benchmark for our own. This creates a performative culture, a society that rewards the smile and quietly punishes the sigh. When we are sad, we do not simply feel the weight of the emotion. We feel the weight of the expectation to hide it. We fear that showing sadness is a social liability, that it makes us look broken or difficult. Consequently, we develop a secondary layer of emotional labor. We spend our internal energy constructing a mask of cheerfulness. This performative optimism is perhaps the most exhausting habit of the modern mind. We are so busy maintaining the appearance of happiness that we never allow ourselves the space to actually be with our sadness. We treat our internal weather as something that must be sanitized before it is presented to the public. And in doing so, we become strangers to ourselves. Sadness as a biological and evolutionary fact. To view sadness as a malfunction is to ignore the biological reality of our existence. Sadness is an evolutionary adaptation, a signal that something has shifted in our environment, our connections, or our internal status. It is a slowdown mechanism. When we are sad, our energy levels naturally drop, our social interactions may become more selective, and our focus turns inward. This is the mind's way of signaling a need for reflection, for processing, or for rest. In the natural world, a creature that is wounded or grieving does not try to force itself to hunt or play. It withdraws, it heals, and it integrates the experience. Yet, in our modern hyperproductive society, we treat this natural withdrawal as a productivity block. We try to override the biological signal with caffeine, distraction, or forced social engagement. When we do this, we are effectively fighting our own immune system. Sadness is not a blockage of the flow of life. It is a vital part of the cycle. It is the restorative phase of our emotional metabolism. Just as the body requires sleep after a long day, the mind requires periods of sadness, introspection, and quietude after the various challenges of living. The fallacy of the emotional malfunction. The belief that sadness is a malfunction is perhaps the most dangerous misconception we carry. It implies that there is a correct way for a human being to feel at all times. But ask yourself, is the sky malfunctioning when it is cloudy? Is the ocean broken when it is rough? The mind is a vast open landscape, and emotions are the weather patterns that pass through it. A cloud is not a permanent fixture of the sky. It is a temporary formation caused by conditions. Once the conditions change, the cloud dissipates. When we label sadness as a malfunction, we begin to diagnose ourselves. We turn a feeling into a problem to be solved. We start to ask, what is wrong with me? Why can't just be happy? These questions are the engines of unnecessary suffering. They shift our attention away from the direct experience of the emotion and toward a narrative of self-judgment. We stop feeling the sadness and start thinking about the sadness. We create a secondary, intellectualized version of the pain that is far more durable and complex than the original emotion itself. The wisdom of observation. Buddhism invites us to adopt the stance of a scientist observing nature. When a scientist looks at a phenomenon, they do not stand in judgment of it, they simply record its characteristics. They observe how it arises, how it behaves, and how it eventually fades away. If we apply this same, detached clarity to our sadness, the nature of the experience shifts. Instead of being a sad person, you become a person experiencing sadness. The distance between you and the emotion creates a crucial window of freedom. In this window, you realize that you are the space in which the sadness is occurring. Not the sadness itself, you are the sky, and the emotion is merely a storm. The storm may be intense, it may be dark, and it may be uncomfortable, but it has no power to destroy the sky. By reclaiming this perspective, you stop being a victim of your emotions and start being their witness. Chapter 3. Resistance creates internal war. The anatomy of the internal war. Most people operate under the mistaken belief that their suffering is caused by the content of their emotion, that the pain of sadness, the heat of anger, or the sharpness of grief is what exhausts them. Buddhism posits a different, more profound truth. Your suffering is not caused by the emotion itself, but by the fight against it. When an unwanted emotion arises, a flicker of loneliness, a wave of disappointment, a shadow of despair, the mind instantly launches an internal defense system. It begins to issue directives. I shouldn't feel this. This is a sign of weakness. I need to get rid of this immediately. This is the beginning of the internal war. By labeling the emotion as an enemy that must be defeated, you effectively double the weight of your experience. You are no longer just dealing with the raw, simple sensation of sadness. You are now also dealing with the complex, layered frustration of trying to suppress that sadness, the effort of suppression. Consider the energy expenditure involved in suppression. When you treat an emotion as an adversary, you must remain in a constant state of hypervigilance. You have to monitor your inner landscape, watching for the first signs of the forbidden emotion, and then immediately mobilizing your mental resources to combat it. This is a form of emotional brasinga, tightening of the mind and body, that is both physically and mentally draining. It is like trying to hold a large, buoyant beach ball underwater. The deeper the emotion, and the more unacceptable you judge it to be, the more force you must apply to keep it submerged. The effort required is constant, relentless, and unsustainable. You cannot relax because the moment you lose focus, the emotion pushes upward, demanding to be felt. This is why people who spend their lives suppressing negative emotions feel a chronic sense of fatigue. They are not tired from living, they are tired from fighting. They are carrying a heavy, internal weight that they refuse to acknowledge. And the effort of that refusal is the primary source of their exhaustion, the feedback loop of resistance. Resistance is not a static state, it is a dynamic process that feeds on itself. The more you fight an emotion, the more alive you make it. By refusing to let it be, you lock your attention onto it. You replay it mentally, you analyze it, you construct elaborate stories about why it happened and what it means for your future. You are essentially pouring gasoline onto the very fire you are trying to extinguish. This is the irony of the inner war. The very act of trying to escape the sadness ensures that you remain trapped within it. You are not experiencing the emotion as a transient event. You are experiencing it as a persistent, recurring battle. You have turned a temporary storm into a permanent climate. Every time you think I shouldn't be feeling this, you are strengthening the identity of the I who is being victimized by the emotion. You are creating a narrative of struggle that sustains the feeling far beyond its natural lifespan. The illusion of should. The primary weapon in this inner war is the word should. The mind is a machine built for shoulds. I should be over this by now. I should be stronger. I should be able to control how I feel. These shoulds are not observations of reality. They are demands placed upon reality. They are an attempt to force the universe and your own consciousness to behave according to a rigid, idealized blueprint. When you say I should not feel sad, you are contradicting the evidence of your own experience. You are telling the truth of your body and your heart that they are wrong. This is a profound act of self-violence. It is a fundamental rejection of your own humanity. True peace arrives only when the demand for should is replaced by the observation of is. Peace begins the moment you stop arguing with the fact of your current state. You do not have to like the sadness, but you must stop denying it. You must recognize that fighting a feeling is the surest way to guarantee it stays. Chapter 4. Acceptance is not giving up, the misconception of passivity. The most significant barrier to true healing is the belief that acceptance is synonymous with passivity. In our achievement-oriented culture, we are taught that to accept something is to admit defeat, lie down in the face of adversity, and let it wash over us. We fear that if we accept our sadness, we are essentially inviting it to stay forever. We worry that if we stop fighting our anxiety, it will consume us. However, from the Buddhist perspective, acceptance is not a passive surrender. It is an act of profound, active clarity. It is the courageous decision to stop living in a fantasy world where you believe you can dictate the weather of your own consciousness. When you accept, you are not saying, I like this, or I want this to last forever. You are simply stating a radical, honest truth. This is what is present right now. This is the starting point of all genuine transformation. You cannot change a reality that you refuse to acknowledge. By accepting the current state of your mind, you are finally standing on solid ground, ready to navigate the experience with awareness rather than reacting to it from a place of fear. The clarity of honest observation. Imagine you are lost in a dense fog. Resistance is like closing your eyes and running in the direction you hope is the exit, convinced that if you just move fast enough you will escape. Acceptance, by contrast, is stopping, opening your eyes and acknowledging the fog. You are not giving up on finding your way out, you are simply stopping the erratic movement that is causing you to stumble. When you accept sadness, you stop trying to explain it away, rationalize it, or force it into a box. You allow it to occupy its space in your awareness. This is a state of deep, objective honesty. Because you are no longer blinded by the panic of resistance, you begin to see the emotion clearly. You notice that sadness is not a solid, permanent monolith. You see that it has a texture, a rhythm, and a center. You notice how it shifts when you breathe. By observing it without the interference of your judgment, you rob the emotion of its power to dictate your reality. You are no longer being the sadness, you are witnessing it. Acceptance as the end of the secondary struggle. Earlier, we discussed the extra layer of suffering, the indignation we feel when life doesn't go our way. This is the secondary struggle. The primary struggle is the pain itself, e.g. the loss of a loved one, the sting of a failure. The secondary struggle is the mind saying, I shouldn't be feeling this. Acceptance is the immediate cessation of this secondary struggle. When you accept, you stop adding the shoulds to your pain. You realize that while you cannot always control the primary event, the loss or the failure, you have total sovereignty over the secondary layer. By dropping the resistance, you reduce your total suffering by half or more. You are left with the pain. Yes, but it is a clean pain. It is a pain that is moving, shifting, and fading, rather than a pain that is being held in place by the tension of your own rejection. The courage to be uncomfortable. There is a unique kind of courage required to stop fighting. When we spend our lives in the inner war, we are at least doing something. We are busy. We are striving. We are fixing. It feels productive. Acceptance feels, by comparison, remarkably quiet. It feels like doing nothing but to sit with your discomfort without trying to escape it is one of the most difficult things a human being can do. This is not weakness. This is the ultimate form of strength. It is the ability to hold your own experience with compassion and curiosity, even when that experience is painful. It is the act of treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a friend in pain. If a friend came to you in tears, would you tell them, "Stop it, you shouldn't feel that"? Of course not. You would offer them space, patience, and a presence that says, "I see you, and it is okay to feel this." Acceptance is turning that same compassionate presence toward yourself. Transformation through presence. When you stop treating your emotions as things to be solved, you allow them to be transformed. Emotions are energy. They are meant to be felt, processed, and released. When they are met with acceptance, they complete their cycle. A wave of sadness that is fully felt and accepted will naturally crest and fall away, leaving the mind clearer than it was before. It is only when we block the wave, when we try to dam it up with resistance, that it becomes a stagnant, poisonous flood. Acceptance is the gate to this release. It is the moment you move from being a manager of your inner life to being its guardian. You are no longer trying to curate a perfect, painless existence. You are embracing the full spectrum of the human experience. In doing so, you discover a peace that is not fragile, because it does not depend on everything being good. It is a peace that is deep, resilient, and inherently free. Chapter 5. Happiness is a byproduct, not a goal. The failure of the goal-oriented life. We have been conditioned by the modern world to treat happiness as a target. We act as if our lives are a series of architectural projects where, if we just place the right bricks in the right order, the right job, the right partner, the right amount of savings, we will finally arrive at the structure of happiness. We treat happiness like a milestone on a map, and we spend our days navigating the terrain, constantly checking our progress. Am I happy yet? Is this it? Why don't I feel the way I thought I would? This self-monitoring is the death of genuine joy. It turns our internal landscape into a laboratory of constant evaluation. When we make happiness a goal, we inadvertently introduce a sense of lacking into every moment. We are implying that the current moment is not enough, that we are not enough, and that we must manipulate reality to achieve a better state. This creates an atmosphere of constant, low-level dissatisfaction. By chasing a goal, we are perpetually running away from the only place where peace could possibly be found. Right here, in the unfolding of the present happiness as a natural byproduct. In the Buddhist view, happiness is not a commodity that can be earned or collected. It is an emergent property, a byproduct that appears when the conditions for suffering are removed. Think of the sun. The sun is always there, shining with steady, unchanging intensity. When the clouds pass, the sun is revealed. We do not need to create the sun, we only need to stop clinging to the clouds. When you remove the craving, the resistance, and the demand that life be other than it is, you are left with a natural, quiet clarity. That clarity is the happiness we are looking for. But it looks very different from the ecstatic, high-energy joy we see in advertisements. It is not a spike of excitement. It is a stable, calm, and resonant state of being. It is what remains when you stop struggling. When you stop stirring the water of your mind, the silt settles, and the water becomes transparent. You don't have to make the water clear, you simply have to stop disturbing it. The anxiety of self-monitoring. When happiness becomes an objective, we become obsessed with our own internal state. We move through the world with a mental thermometer, constantly checking our temperature. Am I feeling good? Am I feeling peace? Am I feeling joy? This preoccupation creates a split in the psyche. There is the experiencer and the monitor. The monitor is always standing in the background, critiquing the experience. This habit creates a wall of artificiality between you and your life. You are not truly experiencing the sunset, the conversation, or the task at hand. You are experiencing your evaluation of these things. Is this moment making me happy? This question kills the moment. It turns your life into a critique instead of a lived experience. To let go of happiness as a goal is to dismantle the monitor. It is to let yourself be fully absorbed in the activity, the feeling, and the world, without checking to see if it meets your happiness quota. The paradox of pursuit. There is a fundamental paradox in human desire. The more effort you apply to capture a feeling, the more turbulence you create in your mind. Trying to force happiness is like trying to flatten the surface of a pond by striking it with your hand. The more force you use, the more ripples you create. By letting go of the pursuit, you stop creating the turbulence. You allow the mind to return to its natural resting state. This is often the most frightening part of the practice for the modern individual. The idea that if you stop trying to be happy, you will descend into a dark, empty void. But that void is a myth. What you find instead is a profound sense of relief. You find a capacity to experience joy that is not dependent on circumstances. You find that you can be happy while you are sad, or happy while you are working, or happy while you are simply breathing. You discover that joy is not a peak you have to climb to, but a baseline that becomes visible when you are not busy running away from yourself. Life without the must. When you cease to treat happiness as a requirement, you liberate yourself from the tyranny of must. Life becomes an unfolding mystery rather than a series of mandatory achievements. You are no longer navigating the world with a checklist of emotional requirements. You are free to feel whatever arises: grief, excitement, boredom, curiosity, knowing that none of these feelings are a verdict on your life. This is the transition from a contractual relationship with life where you trade your effort for the reward of feeling good to a participatory relationship. You are no longer waiting for the reward. You are already there. You have stopped the chasing, and in the silence that follows, you find that the peace you were looking for was never missing. It was simply buried under the noise of your own demands. Chapter 6. Mindfulness transforms sadness. The misunderstanding of calm. In contemporary society, mindfulness has been largely rebranded as a stress reduction tool or a relaxation technique. We see it sold as a way to feel better, to lower our blood pressure, or to help us sleep. While these may be pleasant side effects, they miss the core point of the practice. If you use mindfulness simply to calm down, you are still engaged in the old game of resistance. You are using a technique to escape the reality of your current state. You are treating mindfulness like a mild tranquilizer. In the tradition of the Buddha, mindfulness is not a tool for changing how you feel. It is a tool for seeing what is happening without distortion. Its purpose is not to make the storm go away. Its purpose is to show you the storm, the clouds, the wind, and the sky with such total clarity that you realize the storm cannot touch you. True mindfulness is the act of dropping the narrative layers that the mind constantly wraps around raw experience, stripping away the narrative. When sadness arises, the untrained mind rarely experiences sadness. Instead, it experiences a frantic narrative about sadness. I am failing, this will last forever. I shouldn't be feeling this, what is wrong with me? These thoughts are the layers that create the heavy, suffocating weight of emotional suffering. They are the interpretations we layer on top of the raw energy of the emotion. Mindfulness acts as a scalpel. It separates the raw, passing sensation from the story you have attached to it. When you are mindful, you recognize, there is a sensation of tightness in the chest. There is a thought about the future. By naming these things, you strip away the power of the story. You stop being depressed and start experiencing a sequence of physiological sensations and mental images. The moment you see that they are just sensations and images, they lose their ability to define your identity, witnessing the arising and passing. Everything in the human experience is governed by the law of impermanentia. Mindfulness allows us to witness this law in real time. When you sit with sadness with a mindful, non-judgmental awareness, you begin to notice that the emotion is not a static object. It is a process. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Most people never notice the end of sadness because they are too busy fighting it or trying to escape it. They keep it alive by feeding it more stories. When you watch it mindfully, you see the truth. The sadness crests, it fluctuates, and then it begins to dissolve of its own accord. You realize that you didn't have to do anything to get rid of it. You only had to give it the space to finish its cycle. You learn that emotions are not permanent residents of your mind, they are temporary visitors. By watching them pass, you develop a deep, unshakable trust in your own resilience, the clarity of seeing clearly. There is a profound difference between reacting and responding. A reactive mind is a mind that is triggered. It is a mind that jumps from a sensation of pain to a conclusion of misery. This is the autopilot mode of the untrained ego. Mindfulness provides the space between the trigger and the response. In that space, clarity resides. You can see the emotion rising. You can feel the urge to push it away, and you can choose, instead, to lean into it with your attention. This is not about liking the pain, it is about knowing the pain. By knowing it intimately, you stop fearing it. When you stop fearing your own emotions, you stop being owned by them. This is the transformation. The sadness is no longer a cage, it is a wave that you are learning to surf. You are no longer managing your feelings, you are inhabiting them with a vast, open awareness that is capable of holding everything. The end of self-distortion. Ultimately, mindfulness transforms sadness by ending our distortion of reality. We suffer because we believe our thoughts are truths. We believe that if our mind says, "I am unlovable," then we are unlovable. Mindfulness teaches us that thoughts are just mental events. They are not the truth, they are not reality. They are just the weather of the mind. By returning again and again to the breath, to the body, and to the present moment, you reclaim your seat as the observer. You stop believing the catastrophic scripts that the mind writes when it is sad. You start to see that underneath the sadness, there is a stillness that is always there. You don't have to go anywhere to find it. You just have to stop looking through the lens of your own distorted stories and start looking at life directly, as it is. Chapter 7. True freedom is emotional non-attachment. The myth of emotional apathy. A common yet profound misconception about Buddhism is that non-attachment is a synonym for emotional coldness or apathy. Many fear that if they stop clinging to their emotions, they will become robotic, indifferent, or incapable of love and passion. They imagine that a non-attached person is a hollow shell, floating through life without caring about the outcome of their actions. This is the exact opposite of the truth. Non-attachment is not the absence of feeling, it is the absence of possessiveness. When you are attached to an emotion, you are essentially trying to freeze it in time. You are saying, "I want this joy to last forever," or "I want this sorrow to never return." By doing so, you stop experiencing the emotion as it truly is a living, moving force and start experiencing it as a commodity you are terrified of losing. Non-attachment allows you to feel more deeply, not less, because you are no longer distracted by the fear of change. You can enjoy the sunlight today without spending your energy, mourning the fact that the sun will eventually set. The palm versus the fist. Consider the difference between holding something in an open palm and gripping it in a closed fist. When you hold an object in an open palm, you can feel its weight, its temperature, and its texture. You can appreciate it fully. But because your hand is open, you are not burdened by the fear of losing it. If it rolls away, you are still left with your hand. Most of us treat our emotions like a closed fist. We squeeze them so tightly that we crush the very life out of them. We want to own our joy, own our partner, own our good reputation. This grip is the definition of bondage. When you practice non-attachment, you are simply opening your hand. You are saying, "I allow this emotion to be here. I feel it, I experience it, but I do not require it to define who I am." You are no longer managed by your inner weather. You are not the storm, you are the sky that contains it, being managed by inner weather. Think of how much of your life is spent being managed by your moods. When you feel up, you are generous, confident, and optimistic. When you feel down, you are defensive, hopeless, and irritable. Who is in charge here? It is not your mood. You are being managed by the fluctuating chemical and cognitive states of your own mind. This is a fragile way to live. True freedom is the realization that you have the capacity to witness these moods without being driven by them. You can be sad and still act with kindness. You can be anxious and still make a rational decision. By breaking the identification with the emotion, you reclaim your sovereignty. You realize that you are the conscious presence that remains, regardless of whether the mind is currently experiencing joy or despair. This is the ultimate relief. The knowledge that your peace is not a puppet of your emotions, the practice of letting arise and fading. Non-attachment is a practice of observation. It is the art of watching an emotion come into existence, reach its peak, and dissolve. You observe the initial spark of anger. You notice the heat in your body, the tightening of your jaw, and the urge to lash out. In a state of non-attachment, you notice these things, but you do not buy into them. You do not become the anger. You let the anger move through you like a passing breeze. When you do not buy into the emotion, it loses its power to manipulate you. It cannot force you to act in ways you will later regret. You remain calm and collected, not because you are suppressing the emotion, but because you are giving it the space it needs to burn itself out. This creates a massive sense of interior roominess. Your life is no longer a small, cluttered room filled with the debris of your moods. It is a vast, open space where everything is permitted to arrive, and everything is permitted to depart. Emotional sovereignty. This is what it means to be free. Freedom is not the ability to control your life's outcomes. It is the ability to maintain your center amidst the chaos of change. As long as your sense of peace depends on having certain emotions and avoiding others, you are a hostage to the world. You are constantly waiting for the right conditions to be happy. When you embrace non-attachment, the dependency dissolves. You realize that the peace you were looking for is not found in the emotions themselves, but in the spaciousness of your own awareness. You are no longer waiting for the clouds to clear to see the ski. You realize that you are the sky, and you were always clear, even when the clouds were dense. Chapter 8. Peace comes from seeing reality as it is, the great argument with life. At the deepest level of human suffering, we find a consistent pattern. The insistence that reality should be different from what it is. We spend our lives in a constant, low-grade argument with the world. When it rains, we want sun when we are single. We want a partner when we are stressed. We want silence. This is not a preference, it is a demand. We live as if we have signed an unspoken contract with the universe, a contract in which we agree to be happy, provided the universe obeys our specific demands for how life should unfold. When reality fails to meet these demands, which it does constantly, as it is far too vast and indifferent to care about our specific desires, we experience this divergence as a personal injury. We feel offended by reality. We take the change of seasons, the loss of a job, or the behavior of another person as an affront. Peace arrives only when we recognize that this argument is the primary cause of our misery. It is the realization that reality has no obligation to conform to our blueprint, and that the should is a phantom of our own making. The reality of impermanence. The universe operates on the principle of change. Everything that exists, every thought, every physical object, every relationship is in a state of flux. To demand stability in a world defined by change is to engage in a doomed project. Suffering is the delta between the reality of impermanence and our demand for permanence. When we finally accept that life is characterized by the rise and fall of all things, we stop the internal rebellion. We stop treating reality as an adversary that needs to be conquered and start seeing it as a landscape to be navigated. This shift is not a surrender of agency, it is an alignment with the truth. You don't get angry at the tide for coming in, you adjust your position. You don't get angry at the sunset for ending the day, you appreciate the light while it lasts. When we see reality as it is, we cease fighting the natural flow of existence. And in that cessation, peace finally has the room to breathe. Neutrality versus dissatisfaction. Most of us live in a state where we treat neutral moments as dissatisfying. If you are sitting in a room waiting for a bus, and nothing particularly exciting or terrible is happening, the untrained mind labels this as boredom or wasted time. This is a classic example of our argument with life. We cannot bear for a moment to be just what it is. We insist that it be entertaining, productive, or emotionally resonant. But Buddhism teaches us that there is profound peace in the neutral. There is beauty in the mundane. By seeing reality as it is, we strip away the need for every moment to be something. We stop turning neutral moments into dissatisfaction and difficult moments into suffering. We realize that the nothing special of the present moment is actually the most peaceful place to exist. We stop demanding that life be a continuous stream of highs, and we begin to appreciate the quiet, steady rhythm of simply being, ending the insistence. The demand that reality be different is subtle. It shapes our tone of voice, our posture, our relationships, and our internal monologues. It is the persistent unconscious belief that if we push hard enough, we can force the world to obey our desires. Peace arrives when this insistence ends. It happens the moment you decide to drop the fight and instead say, okay, this is it. This is what is happening. The moment you make that decision, the tension in your nervous system begins to unwind. You are no longer holding your breath. waiting for the right moment to arrive. You are finally inhaling the reality that is already here. You have ended the argument. You are no longer in conflict with the universe, you are a participant in it, seeing reality as it is. To see reality as it is requires a total abandonment of our mental filters. It means looking at your life without the overlay of your regrets, your fears, or your expectations. It is a form of radical honesty. It is the ability to look at a difficult situation and see it not as a disaster, but as a series of events. It is the ability to look at a joyful situation and see it not as a treasure to be hoarded, but as a gift to be enjoyed. This level of clarity is the ultimate freedom. It is the end of the mental static that keeps us from seeing clearly. When the static ends, the world looks different. It is not that the world has changed it, it is that you have stopped trying to remake it in your own image. You are finally living in the world as it actually is, not in the world as you demand it to be. This is where peace arrives, not as a result of achieving what you want, but as a result of accepting what is. Chapter 9. Letting go is not loss, it is relief. The fear of the empty hand. One of the most profound psychological hurdles on this path is the belief that letting go is synonymous with losing. We hold on to our regrets, our past identities, our unmet expectations, and our rigid blueprints for the future as if they were essential pillars of our existence. We fear that if we release our grip, we will experience a catastrophic void, that without our burdens, we will have no shape, no substance, and no direction. This fear is the ego's final, desperate attempt to maintain control. It whispers that the weight you are carrying is actually the foundation of your identity. But this is a fundamental deception. You are not your burdens. The history you are holding on to is not your present. It is a mental echo. When you cling to the past, you are trying to walk forward while staring backward, which inevitably leads to stumbling. Letting go is not the act of losing yourself. It is the act of losing the casing that has prevented you from fully inhabiting yourself. The weight of unmet expectations. Consider the sheer volume of stuff we carry in our minds. We carry grievances from years ago, disappointments that we have polished like gemstones, and what-if scenarios that we replay with surgical precision. We hold on to these because they feel familiar. Even though they are painful, they are our pain. And in the strange logic of the mind, familiar pain feels safer than the unknown landscape of peace. Letting go is the relief of putting down a heavy bag you have been carrying for miles. You are not losing anything of value. You are simply ending the labor of holding on to items that were never meant to be held. When you finally release these burdens, when you drop the demand that a past event should have gone differently, or that a specific person should have acted another way, you experience an immediate shift in your physical and mental state. The tension in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest, the background hum of anxiety begins to dissipate. This is not loss. This is the restoration of your own energy, the safety of the known suffering. Why do we insist on holding on to what hurts us? Because letting go feels unsafe. We have built our sense of self around our struggles. If you take away your primary source of unhappiness, you are left with the terrifying question, who am I without my drama? Buddhism teaches that this self is a fluid, ever-changing process, not a static entity that needs to be protected. Letting go is the practice of trusting that life is enough without the ornamentation of your suffering. It is the practice of stepping out of the known pain into the unknown vastness of the present. It is the ultimate act of faith, the faith that you are capable of being, without needing the crutch of your past regrets or your rigid expectations. The relief of surrender. Letting go is not an act of weakness, it is an act of supreme intelligence. It is the realization that some things are simply too heavy to carry, and not worth the price of your peace. When you practice letting go, you aren't doing it for the greater good, you are doing it for yourself. You are choosing to stop the exhaustion. Imagine a river. If you throw a stone into the river, it sinks. But if you throw a feather, it floats away with the current. Our attachments are stones we have tied to our own ankles, and then we wonder why we are drowning. Letting go is simply untying the knot. It is the relief of realizing that you don't have to control the current to survive it. You don't have to own the water, you only have to flow with it. The moment you release the stone, you don't sink, you become light. You gain the ability to move, to change, and to respond to the river as it is. Integration into the now. The peace we seek is not something we find in the future. It is what remains when we stop carrying the past. When you let go of your rigid ideas of how life should unfold, you are finally free to participate in life as it is unfolding. You are no longer divided by your internal struggle. You are fully present, fully engaged, and fully capable of experiencing the richness of the current moment. This is the shift from carrying to living. You are no longer a curator of your own trauma, but a participant in the mystery of existence. You don't lose anything by letting go. You gain the ability to hold your life in an open hand. And from this place of lightness, you discover that you are stronger, more resilient, and more alive than you ever were when you were busy carrying the weight of your own demands. Chapter 10. Stillness is what remains when the mind stops chasing. The illusion of created stillness. We are conditioned to believe that stillness is an absence of noise, an absence of problems, an absence of conflict. We imagine that if we could just clear our schedule, move to a quiet location, or achieve a life free of complications, we would finally experience the stillness we crave. We hunt for these perfect conditions. We build elaborate lives in the hope that they will provide us with a sanctuary. But the moment we find ourselves in the silence, the mind accustomed to the chase begins to manufacture new noise. It worries about the future, dissects the past, and invents new problems because it is addicted to the momentum of wanting. Stillness cannot be created because it is not an object. You cannot produce it, and you cannot force it into existence. The mind is like a turbulent river. You cannot make it still by hitting the surface with a stick. You can only allow it to be, and wait for the sediment to settle. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of struggle. It is what emerges when you stop reaching, stop fixing, and stop demanding that the present moment be something other than what it is. The noise of the reaching mind. The mind is rarely still, because it is perpetually leaning into the next moment. It is always reaching toward a future that it deems safer, reaching away from a present that it deems insufficient. This constant reaching creates a background hum of tension. Even in moments of apparent calm, the mind is busy scanning the horizon for the next danger or the next pleasure. This is the noise of the reaching mind, and it is the primary obstacle to experiencing our inherent peace. When we practice mindfulness, we are not trying to turn off the mind. We are simply becoming aware of the reaching. We notice the impulse to lean forward, the impulse to predict, the impulse to judge. By simply observing this reaching, we soften it. We realize that the reaching is just a habit of the mind. As we stop participating in the habit, the mental machinery begins to slow down. The noise dies away, not because we forced it to stop, but because we stopped feeding it our attention. Stillness as a reveal. If you were to take a jar of muddy water and let it sit on a table, what happens? You don't need to do anything to the water. You don't need to fix the mud. If you simply leave it alone, the mud will naturally settle to the bottom, and the water will become transparent. This is the process of revealing stillness. Stillness is the clear water of your own awareness, and the mud is the agitation of your thoughts and desires. We are already essentially still. Our fundamental nature is open, spacious, and peaceful. It is our obsession with doing and becoming that clouds this clarity. When we stop the chase, the mud of our internal struggle begins to settle. We don't have to find stillness, we only have to uncover it. We do this by simply pausing, by taking a moment to breathe, to be present, and to recognize that at this exact moment, there is actually nothing that needs to be chased, the absence of inner struggle. True stillness is not about a lack of activity. You can be in a busy city, engaged in a conversation, or working on a complex project, and still be internally still. This is because stillness is the absence of inner struggle. It is the ability to engage with the world without the reaching or the resisting that creates the friction we call stress. When you are no longer reaching toward a future goal to validate your existence, you can be fully present with whatever you are doing. You are not doing the task to get to the end of the task. You are simply doing the task. This is the beauty of the stillness. It allows you to engage with life with a clean, unburdened focus. You become like a mirror that reflects the world without getting stained by it. The mirror is not active, it just is. And in that just being, there is a profound, unshakable stillness that is never disturbed by the events of the day. The peace of nothing to do. The hardest lesson of this chapter is the realization that, in the deepest sense, there is nothing that needs to be chased. We have been conditioned to believe that life is a mission that must be completed. We feel a constant pressure to prove our worth through our movement, our accomplishments, and our mental gymnastics. Stillness invites you to put down the mission. It invites you to recognize that you are not a project. You don't have to be anything, prove anything, or reach anywhere. You are already whole. When you truly inhabit this realization, the mind stops its frantic motion. It relaxes, it broadens, and it settles into the vastness of the present. You are still, not because you have achieved anything, but because you have finally stopped the unnecessary effort of trying to be more than what you already are. Chapter 11. You were never meant to be happy all the time. The tyranny of the positive ideal. We live in an era that has turned happiness into a mandate. Modern media, social platforms, and even psychological trends implicitly suggest that if you are not perpetually satisfied, energized, and optimistic, there is something inherently broken in your architecture. This belief creates a toxic feedback loop. We feel sad, and then we feel ashamed for feeling sad. We feel anxious, and then we feel like a failure for not being Zen. Buddhism directly challenges this illusion by acknowledging the basic nature of human existence. Life is a mix of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral experiences. The Buddha did not teach the end of sadness, he taught the end of the unnecessary suffering caused by demanding that life be a continuous, uninterrupted stream of happiness. To expect perpetual happiness is like expecting the weather to be nothing but sun, or the tide to never go out. It is a fundamental denial of the way the universe functions, and it is the primary engine of our modern, self-imposed misery. The cost of the illusion. When we embrace the myth that happiness is the only acceptable state, we inadvertently poison our own experience. Every moment of boredom, every instance of grief, and every feeling of doubt becomes a source of panic. We start to wonder, is this it? Is my life falling apart? The moment we perceive our natural emotional fluctuations as a personal failure, we stop living and start performing. This illusion turns us into emotional censors. We are constantly monitoring ourselves, pruning away our unpleasant feelings as if we were gardening a topiary. But the human heart is not a topiary, it is a wild forest. It needs the rain as much as it needs the sun. By denying the shadow, we lose the depth. By forcing the smile, we lose our authenticity. We become brittle, fragile beings, easily shattered by the first sign of emotional difficulty. Because we have no framework for understanding that feeling bad is actually a sign of being alive, not a sign of being broken. The liberation of enough. The moment you realize you were never meant to be happy all the time, a massive weight drops from your shoulders. It is a profoundly radical shift. You stop interpreting your unhappiness as a crisis. You realize that sadness, frustration, and even despair are not symptoms. They are just emotions. They are visitors, not residents. When you accept that you were not designed to be a happiness machine, you stop trying to fix yourself. You stop the internal violence of shaming your own feelings. You can look at your sadness and say, "This is uncomfortable, but it is not wrong." This shift in perspective is the ultimate relief. It allows you to move through your life with a sense of grace, because you are no longer fighting the natural rhythm of your own heart. You are no longer measuring your worth against an impossible standard of constant joy. Finding wholeness in the fluctuation. There is a profound difference between happiness and wholeness. Happiness is a fragile, fleeting state that depends on favorable conditions. Wholeness, however, is the capacity to contain the entire spectrum of human experience. A whole person is not one who is always happy. A whole person is one who can hold their happiness and their grief, their strength and their fragility, their light and their shadow, within the same awareness. This is the beauty of the Buddhist path. It does not lead to a flat line of forced cheerfulness. It leads to a vibrant, vast, and inclusive way of living. You are no longer trying to delete parts of yourself to fit into a mold of perfection. You are allowing yourself to be the entire, complex, and beautiful human being you were always meant to be. When you stop chasing the peak of constant happiness, you find something far more valuable: the ability to be at peace exactly where you are, regardless of the emotional weather, the end of the personal failure. Once you understand that emotions arise and pass according to conditions, not according to your moral worth or your success as a human. You stop taking your moods personally. You stop thinking that you are a failure because you are tired, or that your life is meaningless because you feel lonely. You recognize these as part of the human rhythm. This is the end of the self-improvement trap. You realize that you don't need to fix your moods to be at peace. You don't need to reach a state of enlightenment where you are perpetually grinning. You only need to reach a state of acceptance. You have already been granted the gift of experience. Your life is not a problem to be solved, it is a process to be lived. And in that process, the highs and the lows are just the breathing of the soul. Chapter 12. Acceptance is the end of inner violence, the unconscious aggression of the mind. Most of us are unaware that we are waging a quiet, relentless war against ourselves all day long. Whenever an unwanted emotion arises, when a sharp pang of envy, a heavy wave of sadness, or a jagged edge of anger surface, the immediate response of the conditioned mind is an act of aggression. We attack the feeling. We shame it. We tell ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling this way, that we are weak for being affected, or that this emotion is a defect we need to excise. We do not realize that every time we suppress, shame, or attempt to force an emotion to disappear, we are committing an act of inner violence. We are effectively telling our own consciousness that it is not allowed to exist in its natural state. This self-aggression is not a minor mental quirk. It is one of the deepest and most consistent sources of human suffering. By turning against our own experience, we create a profound sense of fragmentation and self-rejection that leaks into every area of our lives. The cost of self-rejection. When you shame your own sadness or attack your own anxiety, you are creating a house divided. You are setting up an internal dynamic where you, the judge, are constantly at war with you, the experience. This creates a chronic state of tension. You become a person who is constantly on guard against your own heart. This self-rejection is the fundamental defect we imagine we have. We spend years trying to fix ourselves, thinking that if we could just get rid of the wrong parts, we would finally be acceptable. But the more we reject those parts, the more they become shadow entities that control us from the dark. The violence of self-rejection is what keeps our shadows alive. When you refuse to acknowledge and hold your own pain with compassion, that pain does not disappear, it hardens into a defense mechanism, manifesting as irritability, cynicism, or numbness. Acceptance as the cessation of hostility. Acceptance is the immediate, non-negotiable end of this violence. The moment you decide to stop attacking your own experience, the war is over. This does not mean you have to like the sensation of pain. It means you have stopped the aggression toward the pain. You are no longer punching yourself for feeling what you feel. This shift is incredibly powerful. When you stop attacking your own emotions, you create a safe container for them. You become a sanctuary for your own humanity. When a difficult emotion arises, instead of the immediate "I shouldn't feel this," you offer the response "I feel this, and it is okay to feel this." This is a radical, compassionate act. It is the moment you stop treating your mind as a problem to be solved and start treating it as a part of your being to be understood. The healing power of presence. Inner violence creates the urgency that makes us run away from ourselves. When you stop the violence, the urgency dissolves. You no longer feel the need to medicate, distract, or suppress your experience because you are no longer making yourself wrong for having it. This is the alchemy of mindfulness. By replacing self-judgment with self-presence, you transform the texture of the emotion. When you observe your sadness with kindness, the sadness loses its sharp, poisonous edge. It becomes softer, more fluid, and easier to process. You discover that you are not broken at all. You were just treating your natural response to life as a crime. The violence was never in the emotion, it was in your refusal to let yourself be human. The end of the self-repair project. Inner violence is the fuel that keeps the self-repair project running. As long as you believe you are fundamentally wrong, you will spend your life trying to fix yourself. You will chase gurus, therapies, habits, and ideologies in a desperate hope to become better. Acceptance ends this project. It is the profound realization that there is nothing to fix, because there is no you that is separate from the changing flow of life. When you stop trying to fix yourself, the self-rejection dissolves. You realize that you can be at peace while you are sad, while you are anxious, while you are messy, and while you are human. You finally give yourself permission to exist exactly as you are, and in that permission, you find the wholeness you were always trying to build. Chapter 13. You stop suffering the moment you stop demanding. The root of the demand. At the center of every instance of suffering is a demand. It may be silent, it may be subtle, but it is always there. When you feel frustrated because the traffic is slow, there is a demand. The road should be clear for me. When you feel hurt because a friend didn't respond to your message, there is a demand. They should treat me with the consideration I expect. When you feel depressed about your life circumstances, there is a demand. My life should look different than this. Suffering is not caused by the traffic, the silence, or the circumstances. Suffering is the friction that occurs when reality hits the wall of your demand. You are effectively holding a trial in your mind, putting reality on the stand, finding it guilty for failing to meet your standards, and sentencing yourself to misery as a result. The Buddha taught that we suffer not because life is difficult, but because we believe that reality is obligated to obey our preferences. The moment you remove the demand, the suffering, the psychological tightening dissolves. The tightening of the mind. When reality fails to meet a demand, the mind does something specific, it tightens. You can feel this physically. Your chest restricts, your stomach knots, your thoughts become jagged and rapid. That sensation of tightening is the suffering. It is a biological and mental reaction to the collision between what is and what I want. Most of us spend our lives in this state of chronic contraction. We are so used to the feeling of tightening that we think it is the baseline of existence. We don't realize that we are the ones pulling the strings. Every time you think, I can't believe this is happening, you are pulling the string and tightening the knot to stop suffering. You do not need to change the world, you only need to stop pulling the string. You need to recognize that the demand is an optional artificial construct, a mental habit that you can put down at any time. The end of the should. The demand is always powered by the word should. It is the most dangerous word in the human language. It is a linguistic anchor that keeps us stuck in the past or the future, refusing to accept the present. As long as you believe that it should be different, you are effectively incapable of seeing what is. You are blinded by your own bias. When you practice the cessation of demand, you start to use the word is instead. The traffic is slow. My friend is busy. My life is exactly as it is right now. This is not resignation, it is observation. It is the restoration of your clarity. When you accept the is, you regain the ability to act effectively. When you are caught in the should, you are merely reacting to your own frustration. By dropping the demand, you stop being a victim of your own expectations and start being a conscious participant in the life that is actually unfolding. Freedom from the obligation of reality. We live under the delusion that if we suffer enough, we can force reality to change. We think that if we worry, fret, or complain enough, we can correct the world. But reality does not respond to our suffering. The weather does not clear because you are upset that it is raining. Life does not organize itself according to your feelings. The Buddha did not teach you how to get everything you want. He taught you how to stop needing reality to obey you. This is the ultimate freedom. It is the realization that your peace is not a reward for reality behaving well. Your peace is your own, and it is entirely independent of whether the world meets your demands or ignores them completely. When you stop needing the world to be a certain way, you stop being a servant to the world's fluctuations. You become the master of your own presence. The peace of non-requirement. There is a specific, profound quality of peace that comes from non-requirement. It is the freedom of entering a situation without a hidden list of needs. When you interact with others without demanding they be a certain way, your relationships transform. You are no longer trying to extract validation from them. You are simply present with them. When you approach your work without demanding it be easy or rewarding, you can simply do the work. This is the end of the argument with life. You are no longer pleading with reality to be better. You are looking it in the eye and accepting it as a complex, messy, beautiful, and impartial event. This acceptance is not a weakness, it is a superpower. It is the ability to stand in the eye of the storm, perfectly at peace. Not because the storm has stopped, but because you have stopped demanding that it be anything other than a storm. Chapter 14. Nothing needs to be fixed for you to be at peace. The fallacy of the defective self. Perhaps the most deeply ingrained assumption in the human mind is the belief that we are broken or incomplete projects in need of constant, lifelong repair. We wake up each morning with a silent, pervasive suspicion that something is fundamentally wrong with us that, if we just worked harder, meditated more, achieved more, or managed our emotions better, we would finally earn the right to be at peace. This creates an exhausting, treadmill-like existence. We treat our minds as machines that are constantly malfunctioning, and we treat our emotions as technical glitches to be debugged. But this is the ultimate trap. The self-repair project is a project that can never be finished because it is based on the premise that you are a mistake. Buddhism dismantles this delusion completely. You are not a project to be completed. You are a phenomenon to be experienced. When you treat your discomfort as a defect, you are merely fueling the cycle of rejection. Peace does not arrive at the end of the repair process. Peace is the natural state that becomes visible the moment you stop treating yourself as a problem. Peace as the absence of problem solving. Most people believe that peace is the reward for solving all of their problems. They imagine a future state where they have no worries, no anxieties, and no conflicts. This is a mirage. Life is intrinsically a series of changing conditions. And as long as you are alive, there will always be something to navigate. If your peace depends on the absence of problems, you will never be at peace. True peace is not the absence of problems, it is the absence of the belief that you are the problem. When you stop looking at your sadness, your insecurity, or your confusion as defects, they lose their urgency. They stop being emergencies. You begin to see that discomfort is simply a part of the human condition. It is the texture of living, not a sign of a broken spirit. When you stop trying to fix your inner state, you stop rejecting yourself. In that moment of self-acceptance, the struggle dissolves. You are left with the reality of your current state, and you realize that even in the midst of confusion, you can be at rest, the wholeness of the broken. We are conditioned to believe that fixing ourselves means moving from a state of brokenness to a state of wholeness. But what if you were already whole? What if the broken parts, the fears, the flaws, the past regrets are not parts that need to be removed, but parts that need to be integrated into the whole? A ceramic bowl that has been broken and glued back together is often more beautiful than a pristine, new one. The cracks are part of its history. They are part of its character. Similarly, the cracks in your life, the things you wish you could fix or erase, are what make your humanity real. By trying to fix yourself, you are trying to hide your own history. By accepting yourself, you are embracing the entirety of your life. Peace arrives when you stop trying to sand down the edges of your personality and start standing in the fullness of your reality. The end of the lifelong project. The self-repair project is the primary source of our exhaustion. It requires a constant vigilance, a never-ending audit of our thoughts and feelings. It is an exhausting, lonely, and ultimately futile endeavor. When you let go of this project, a massive amount of energy is returned to you. You are no longer wasting your life trying to become someone else. You are free to inhabit the life you are already living. You don't need to change anything to be worthy of peace. You don't need to achieve a specific level of emotional mastery, nor do you need to reach a state of enlightenment where you never feel pain again. Peace is not a distant peak to be climbed. It is the ground beneath your feet. It is the vast, open awareness that has been present since the beginning, watching your thoughts, feeling your emotions, and experiencing the world. You are already that awareness. You were never broken. You were just too busy trying to fix yourself to notice who you already are. A life fully lived. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you stop rejecting the present moment. You become capable of a kind of engagement that is impossible when you are preoccupied with your own self-improvement. You can listen to others because you aren't busy diagnosing yourself. You can enjoy your work because you aren't trying to use it as a measure of your worth. You can experience sadness without it turning into a crisis. This is the ultimate Buddhist realization. Nothing needs to be changed for you to be at peace. Life is exactly as it is: complex, fleeting, challenging, and beautiful. You are exactly as you are, a conscious being in the middle of a vast unfolding process. When you let go of the demand to be perfect, you gain the freedom to be human. And in that humanity, you find a peace that is not fragile. because it is not based on the hope of a fixed future. It is based on the truth of the present. You are home. Summary: the path of letting go. The chase for happiness has never brought you peace. It has only trained your mind to reject the present and distrust your own experience. We have been conditioned to believe that life is a mission, a series of obstacles, and a quest for a permanent emotional state that does not exist. We have been told that we are projects in need of constant repair, and that our worth is tied to our ability to fix ourselves. Buddhism dismantles this entire framework. It teaches us that happiness was never meant to be permanent, and sadness was never meant to be a failure. Both arise and pass according to the shifting conditions of reality. When you stop demanding that life feel a certain way, the inner fight ends. When you stop treating your mind as a problem to be solved, you stop the inner violence. Peace was never missing. It was just covered by the noise of your own expectations, your own resistance, and your own demands. Let them fall away. Stop the chase, stop the repair, stop the war. What remains in the stillness after the noise is the truth of who you are: a vast, open, and fundamentally peaceful awareness, fully capable of experiencing the entire spectrum of life, and entirely at rest in the only moment that has ever existed, the present. The path ends exactly where it began, right here in the simple, honest recognition of reality as it is. You are already free.